the Evolution Security Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Brian here with Eric and Aaron as always. How you doing, guys?
Man, doing great. Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, it's a nice little vacation that I've got going on here. At least I do. So having a great chill out time with my family.
Nice. Well, hey, we've got a real big show this week that's going to take a bigger chunk of time than normal. So we're going to be real brief on the intro today, but talking about some really timely topics like Kenosha and Atlanta and some stuff like that. So, and with someone who has a bit of an authority on it. So we're just going to real quick give a shout out to Tenacor. Of course, we all own and use Tenacor. You can find them at tenacorusa.com. And of course, if you would like a discount, use the code EVOSEC, EVOSEC at checkout for 10% off, and also Origin of Maine at originmaine.com, another great company, and you can use EVOSEC10 at checkout for 10% off there as well. So told you we'd keep it brief, and we're gonna. So we've got a second-time guest, Mr. Chuck Haggard, coming up. So huge thanks out to him for coming back on the air, and we do want to give another shout-out real quick. We have experienced some issues with social media suppressing some of our posts and potentially not showing posts in people's feed where they should be. So we just want to reach out and ask everyone to share any of the posts that you see, to share the podcast. Pick somebody you know that might like this and, just send them an Apple link or wherever you listen. It would just really help us to get the word out, because I think a lot of this information is very important, and especially in the times that we're in at the moment, especially this interview, I think could be helpful to a lot of people, because in this interview, he really talks about a lot of historical knowledge and where the U.S. has been in situations like this in the past and what the path to recovery may look like. So we want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to experience the Evolution Security Podcast, and obviously find us also at evosec.org and Facebook at evosec USA and Instagram at evosec USA.
Yeah, and if I could add, Brian, regarding iTunes, if you do not listen to our podcast on iTunes, obviously we're on most of the primary platforms. But if you could go over to iTunes, find our podcast, and go on and leave a rating. We're currently at 5 stars. We'd like to keep it that way, but you can be honest. But if you could leave a review, if you leave a good review, we will likely discuss it on the show. But that helps us big time. We've noticed that when we have reviews, we have a bump in listenership. So go over there and do that for us. That will be awesome.
No, thank you. And it's you guys that are going to help us grow. We get a lot of positive feedback from listeners that really get something out of the podcast. And if you're getting something out of the podcast, think of someone else who might get something out of it if you do one of those things. So with that, I think we're going to move straight into the interview. What do you think, guys?
Sounds good.
Perfect.
We have the wonderful opportunity of having a repeat guest, Mr. Chuck Haggard. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thanks for inviting me.
Man, good you could make it. We, of course, have you on a previous podcast, and you gave us a little bit of a bio there, but just for a quick refresher, and definitely encourage people to go back and listen to that. It was a great episode. Just give us, 10 seconds who you are and what you do.
People primarily identify me as being a cop because mainly, I don't know, I've done it for 34 years now. But I'm still not sure what I want to be when I grow up. So I'm now also a firefighter, an air crash rescue specialist, a sheriff's deputy. I'm a trainer with the National Law Enforcement Training Center, famously out of Kansas City. I'm an adjunct instructor for Strategos International, and I have my own business, Agile Training and Consulting.
Nice. That's an awesome 10-second resume. That's very cool, man. And we appreciate what you do and provide for the community, because it definitely makes a difference in a lot of people's lives. And we have learned just in our short experience working with you, and glad for what you do. But I think Aaron's got something for you.
Of course, it's hard not to see the news or open the news and see information about this case with Jacob Blake being shot by officers in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, from you being an expert in use of force and a veteran officer yourself, would you like to go ahead and give maybe an assessment from the beginning to the end of what information you've seen and heard, how those officers handled that?
When we were talking at the beginning and talking about, I don't want to take a pass on that. I want to address it, but I can't really analyze it because this is one of those where it's too soon to tell. There are going to be things that come out, forensics, things like that, which we don't know anything of yet. I haven't seen any official reports. A lot of times when we have these things and the investigation's wrapped up, I can use my cop mafia resources to get a copy of the report or read a copy of the report, things like that, and get a real feel for what happened. With this one, I can tell you that it's going to be a little bit more complex. The fact that the Kenosha cops don't have body-worn cameras makes this a more complicated thing. It's a less cut and dried. We don't have any audio, who said what, things like that. People, going to editorialize here, people expect police work to be like a CSI episode. They, you have a crime, they show up, they do some stuff, and then like they take the DNA and they put it in the magic DNA machine, and then they have the DNA match and a picture of your driver's license and your fingerprint and your favorite ice cream all pops up on the computer. There is as much to do with reality as watching a Star Wars movie. Both CSI and Star Wars are science fiction. I can tell you that here we have, like here in Kansas, we've got the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, would be the state version of like the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They do all their lab work. They have a DNA scientist. If we have a rush order on a murder and they put the DNA in, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks before we get results back, if we're lucky. It takes time to do these things. People expect, like when the COVID hit, people are like, why aren't there any tests? It's a novel virus. You don't have tests for a novel. It's like an alien we've never seen before. Oh, we got a test for that. No, we don't. First, we got to figure out what it is, and then we have to go figure out how to do it, figure out how to take care of it, and then validate the test, et cetera. People have unrealistic expectations of the timeframes on these things. So the deal in Kenosha, I don't expect that this will be a fully wrapped up investigation for another month or two minimum. So what I know thus far isn't congruent with the media narrative. What I saw, the little bit that I could tell on the cell phone video, he had been fighting the cops rather violently. The police report that they attempted to taser him twice and it was unsuccessful. Unlike what people think when they ask, well, why'd you have to shoot him? Why didn't you just taser him? Tasers fail a lot. And in my experience, cops have become entirely too reliant on what I call the magic or electric pistol. And when it fails, they often don't know what to do next. If you don't mind me punting the rest of that answer to one I know a lot more about, do you want to talk about the Atlanta shooting of Mr. Brooks?
Certainly. Because
I think that's great, Chuck, because it is it's timely and it's what's actually kind of, this is sitting on the heels of that. I really think a lot of the reaction we've seen from that was because of that all starting back there.
It's good to talk about because these things have stacked on top of each other, and the results are all these crazy riots going on. So yeah, that'd be great, Chuck.
So one of the things I've been telling people lately that want to talk about it and have an honest conversation about this, because I'm willing to tell you where the warts are. People say right now that there needs to be reform in police work. And I will agree with that. But I'll tell you what it is not what people think it is. As an example, in my state, and you commonly hear things like that, you have to have more initial training hours to be a cosmetologist or a hairdresser than you do in the police academy to be a police officer. Does anybody think that's screwed up?
Absolutely.
Now, our academy is something like, I forget, 820, 840 hours now. You have to have over 1,000 hours in cosmetology school before you can be a cosmetologist. Think about where our priorities are. Police work is one of the few places where you can take a 21, 22-year-old kid, put them out on the street with a gun and a very fast car, and you are giving them permission to do things like arrest people. When you arrest people, you take away their liberty, and they can do it on their own say-so. When you think about it, you can put them into scenarios where they are actively, people always ask you, hey, are you staying out of trouble? And when I was a cop, I used to joke back, no, I'm actively hunting for trouble. If there's any trouble and you see it and I'm not around, call me and I'll show up. That's kind of what cops are supposed to do, right? So you got a 21, 22-year-old kid with a gun and a fast car, and they're out there on their own, and they can make decisions on their own without asking any permission. So when we put them in these situations, which they may be ill-equipped to handle because we haven't prepared them for this activity, and then we have like a car stop where we have a violent felon or some such thing, and it goes sideways, how are we surprised that this has happened? How are we surprised? I'll ask anybody, how is this a shock that things are going to go wrong? The shocking part is how very seldom these things go wrong.
Absolutely.
Now, cops in the United States, there's 330 million people in the United States right now. We're the third most populous nation on the planet. Only China and India have more people than we do. So 330 million people. There's something like 500,000 cops in the United States, the last estimate I saw. There are millions of citizen contacts every year. And less than 1% of those civilian citizen contacts result in any use of force whatsoever. I'm bad. I did not do real well in my statistics class, but I ran down the numbers. I had a buddy of mine that's a CPA kind of proofread my work. Right now in the United States, if you look at the number of people who are fatally shot by the police, your odds of being shot by the police, and I'm disregarding whether it's justified or unjustified, just totality of the circumstances, your odds of being shot by the police are equal, roughly right in there, to your historical odds of being killed by lightning. Do any of you guys walk around on a day-to-day basis worrying about being killed by lightning?
No, and I'll tell you what, I've heard of a lot of people being struck by lightning and living too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You're talking about fatalities, not just being struck even.
Yeah. Yep. I'm talking about being killed by lightning. So your odds of being killed by lightning are about the same as being killed by the police. And this is disregarding the fact that the vast majority of the people who are killed by the police needed to be killed by the police, typically shot. A lot of people will argue, well, the police, blah, 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 blah. So let's do some outliers here. Let's do the Pulse nightclub shooting, right? Everybody's familiar with that one.
Yep.
So eventually the cops had to dig that guy out of where he was hiding, do an explosive breach on the wall and kill him because I forget, he killed 50, 60 people, right? I think everybody can agree the cops needed to kill that guy, right? I think we all agree on that. That is the definition of a justified shooting.
Absolutely.
So now that we're done arguing whether or not the police should or should not be shooting people, we're just arguing about when is it appropriate, when is it not appropriate. And people throw out things like, well, they should have done de-escalation. And I ask people to describe that to me because I've been teaching de-escalation tactics for almost 30 years. Things like verbal judo, talking people into handcuffs, doing the whole the roadhouse thing, be nice until it's time to not be nice, right? That's pretty good advice from Patrick Swayze. But the thing is, I can't de-escalate another human being. It's not Jedi mind trick. They have to cooperate with the process. De-escalation at the street level is a simplified version of what you might think of if hostage negotiators are talking to a barricaded suspect. You're trying to talk the guy out, right? You're doing everything you can to talk the situation into a peaceful resolution. But sometimes what happens? Sometimes a sniper has to shoot the hostage taker, right? There is no other alternative. That just happens sometimes. No matter how hard you try, if they don't cooperate, what are you going to do? Leave? Let them go? Let them kill the hostages? No. And it's kind of the same thing. It's a microcosm of that when you're on the street. You can be as nice as you want to be, but if they don't want to cooperate with the process, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. So that leads me to talking about the Mr. Brooks being shot in Atlanta. Part of the problem with that incident is the officers were actually being too nice, and they were too nice for too long until it turned into a situation where they were desperately trying to play catch up with a violent suspect. There's no reason why two young men were getting their ass beat by one guy, but that's what happened. One of those officers had a concussion and had a facial fracture. He was pretty much out of the fight. Why didn't they use a taser instead? Well, they did try to use a taser. How well did that taser work? It didn't work. So then it turned into them getting beat up, one of them losing a taser, and then it turned into a shooting. In my opinion, if they had been a little less nice and had better physical control tactics, then Mr. Brooks would still be alive. One of the things I've been talking about a lot lately with a whole bunch of people is there's this big move nationwide to ban chokeholds. You guys can't see me making my air quotes right now.
We can hear it.
No, I know we've talked about this too. Yeah, I understand.
So one of the things I do with National Law Enforcement Training Center is I'm a lateral vascular neck restraint instructor. Mr. Lindell, who invented this technique, he formalized what people would think of as a vascular compression or a neck compression technique that came from judo because he was a very high-level judo competitor. He was in the Marine Corps, Korean War vet, and learned judo when he was in Japan. So sport judo has more than 140-year history, and they have techniques that they call shimewaze, which are a variation, and I'll use the term choke because it's so common, even though none of these are actually a choke. And if you look at martial arts competitions, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, they will do what they call like gi chokes, where you're using a guy's gi lapel to compress his neck. You know, you're not even using your hands or your arm. You can choke somebody with their own T-shirt, etc. So all of these techniques are much less controlled than LVNR, but how many deaths do you think are associated with sport judo over the past 140 plus years?
Zero.
Anybody?
Zero or next to zero.
Yeah. None.
None.
It's never happened. I don't know if you guys watch UFC, various MMA bouts. How often do guys lose a MMA match or a UFC fight due to suffering something like a rear naked choke?
All the time.
Often.
It happens all the time, right? So how often do you think in judo dojos and in jiu-jitsu dojos all around the nation on a day-to-day basis, like the dojo I go to has classes 5 days a week, and people engage in jiu-jitsu, and people get themselves caught into various types of neck restraints or, again, air quotes, chokes. How many of those people die?
None. And I get choked. I get choked every jiu-jitsu class. I tap to a choke almost every jiu-jitsu class. So, yeah, it's crazy.
So in the history of Kansas City, LVNR was introduced as a police use of force technique in 1970. And I've seen estimates that it has been applied roughly 250,000 times. Because back in the day, we didn't have pepper spray. We didn't have magic electric pistols. We didn't have any of that stuff. So your choices were you could put a neck restraint on somebody, or you could beat them with a club, right? Punch them in the face, whatever the case may be. So Kansas City, Missouri started using LVNR when Mr. Lindell formalized and started training the system. About 250,000 applications. And since that time, they've never killed anybody. They've never seriously injured anybody, and they've never lost money on litigation with that technique. It's literally outside of pepper spray, which is extraordinarily safe. It is the safest possible use of force technique. The Canadians, who are much more scientific in their research of police use of force, actually documented that the two safest force options for officers are pepper spray and LVNR. Everything else, tasers, physical force, going hands-on, using a baton, certainly, beanbags, etc., all of those have a much greater level of injury. So let's say that the cops in Atlanta were trained like the cops in Kansas City, Missouri. Mr. Brooks would have started to fight when they tried to handcuff him. He would have been hooked up very quickly into an LVNR. There's a level 1, level 2, level 3. Most suspects will stop fighting at level 1 or level 2. And at those levels, they have not been rendered unconscious. It's kind of like in a jits, you're rolling with your partner, he gets you in a good one, you tap out. It's kind of that paradigm. In the Kansas City, Missouri experience, only 15% of the suspects force the officer to render them unconscious. That happens in 3 to 7 seconds. You put the cuffs on, pop them on the back. They wake up in less than 30 seconds. It's a done deal. If cops in Atlanta had neck restraints, Mr. Brooks would still be alive.
Well, and Chuck, just for our listeners, because obviously the four of us understand this in depth, but in your words, explain the difference between what that is and a actual choke where you're restricting an airway and the breathing way. So if just briefly anatomically describe what's happening to the perpetrator.
So a properly described choke is there's a reason why like a choke on your carburetor is called a choke. It's something that cuts off the air. So a choke would be anything that compresses the larynx or the windpipe, if you will. So what you would call a bar arm choke, or something that used to be done back in the olden days that nobody should be doing it anymore. Things like utilizing a nightstick as an instrument for a neck restraint. Where you actually compress the windpipe. Any of those are extraordinarily unsafe. They're dangerous. And actually, in my experience, they work off of panic and pain compliance. And you can make people fight harder. And you end up in a spiral where you're trying to choke harder. They're trying to fight harder, etc. So a vascular neck restraint, you have compression on the sides of the neck. And everybody thinks you can, quote, cut off the carotids. We know from science experimentation in the olden days, when you could get away with doing things, you can't do anything anymore because of ethical issues. The way they used to do some of the medical things in like the 20s. It's impossible for one human being to have enough pressure on another human being's neck to cut off the arteries. So the carotids, because there's just too much pressure on there. Think about your garden hose in your backyard. If you have the water running, if you step on the hose, does the water shut off? No, it might slow down a little bit, but it doesn't shut off because there's too much pressure in the system. Also, what happens is part of that compression on the side of the neck causes basically a massage of the vagal nerve. And that is something that can kind of calms you and it kind of lowers your blood pressure. On top of that, we have what we call the Valsalva maneuver, which is basically where you're holding your breath and you bear down, which would be the mechanism of, you ever see somebody lifting weights like a heavy squat and they hold their breath when they're pushing and then they pass out? That would be Valsalva maneuver, where they make themselves pass out. So all of these things combined is why a vascular neck restraint like the LVNR will make people pass out so quickly with just enough pressure. You don't even leave a mark on them. There's no injury out of something like this. So at any rate, my point is, contrary to the popular narrative right now, chokeholds don't need to be banned. In my humble opinion, they need to be expanded in police training. If you guys have jiu-jitsu experience, in my observation, if your average cop was a 4-stripe white belt or a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, a lot of these incidents we see going sideways wouldn't have gone sideways. One of the axioms that I try to teach my new officers is, if it has to go to force, if we're done talking, if you use enough force early enough, you often don't have to use more force later to fight your way out of a hole, which often results in gunfire. And then sometimes, like the most glaring example would be the Kyle Dinkeller incident. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but you can look up Kyle Dinkeller on the internet. Kyle lost that gunfight, and it didn't have to turn into a gunfight, but he allowed it to happen by lack of doing anything decisive to stop it from happening. And then he ended up not surviving that gunfight. So what it appeared to be in Kenosha was similar dynamics to what happened in Atlanta. I don't want to badmouth the officers. I think their department and their training set them up for failure. They didn't have the tools that they needed in order to handle Mr. Brooks in a manner decisive enough to keep it from turning into a shooting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Chuck, I would also like to add that, all of us do practice jiu-jitsu, and we cannot agree more. That's something that we espouse on our show. We would love to see all law enforcement have like a blue belt will be, and you hit it on the head. A 4-stripe white belt would kick ass on the street. I mean, that's quite a decent level of jiu-jitsu. So we can't agree more with that. So I'd like to take this in a slightly different direction, but still yet partly the same subject. So let me see if I can shape this properly. So the reality versus the media narrative as it relates to all the rioting going on. We're looking at daily, every single evening in cities throughout the nation, rioting, burning down of cities, so on and so forth. That I think one of the biggest frustrations for me is that you have mayors that tell their law enforcement to stand down. You have DAs dropping charges, and these folks are back on the streets the next evening doing the same violent behavior, and yet the media says, "Oh, this is just somewhat peaceful, or they're basically peaceful protest, but yet, I mean, from what I'm seeing is we're seeing escalation exponentially higher than it was just a month ago. What are your thoughts on that reality on the ground and what you're hearing?
Well, I might have a controversial opinion that what we are not seeing is spontaneous organic protest. I am for protesting. In fact, there have been incidents that I am aware of that I'm shocked and amazed that people weren't protesting. I know of actual bad police use of force incidents that I utilized, like one in particular out of North Carolina that led to a really horrible decision by the 4th U.S. District Court on police use of force, because it was bad police work, bad arguments in court, and then a bad court decision by the judges. Because the whole thing, it's garbage in, garbage out, where the cops basically killed a schizophrenic dude because he was schizophrenic and because they were incompetent, and they treated the guy. He wasn't a criminal. He was just, not his fault. He's got schizophrenia, but the way they handled it directly led to the guy's death through no fault of his own. Unlike a lot of the people that we're talking about, Mr. Brooks, active participant in his own demise. The guy in Kenosha, well, he was there against a restraining order, taking his alleged rape victim's keys away from her, causing a disturbance. Had a chance to not fight the cops. He had a chance to, he got tasered unsuccessfully twice. And then he either wants to I think I saw one picture where he actually had a karambit in his hand, but, I haven't seen the full report yet. So at some point there was a knife involved, which is a deadly weapon. He could have chosen at any point to not be that guy, but he forced the issue, right? So most of these guys are authors of their own demise.
Hey, Chuck, if I can just interject, that was one point that you may be making, but at the same time, how much we have to highlight that all of these individuals that have that these rioters are burning down cities for, all of them were felony resisting arrest, which is just an amazing thing that it causes riots when they're felony resisting. In other words, using extreme force to keep from going to jail.
So jumping back in time, one of the reasons I caution on the Kenosha thing, because I might be wrong, maybe the Kenosha thing is going to turn out to be an unjustified use of force, and they improperly shot him and it was excessive force. It might come out that way. If that's the way the investigation goes, that's the way it goes. I have personally caused officers to be arrested for excessive force. I've done that. When they're wrong, they're wrong. When they're right, they're right. But we have to wait for the outcome. Let's go back to Ferguson and the false narrative of hands up, don't shoot. How many of you guys are aware that one of the bullets that went through Michael Brown's hand and arm was lodged inside the driver's door of the police car?
Yep, it happened.
Did you ever hear about that? So the bullet went through his arm or his hand, because he got shot in the arm and hand a couple times, and it was lodged inside the police car door. Now, how does that happen if he's standing in the middle of the street with his hands up saying, don't shoot? Well, it doesn't. And so that's the type of thing you have to wait for lab reports. They got to dig that bullet out of the car. They have to do tissue sampling. They have to DNA Mr. Brown, match the DNA on the bullet to Mr. Brown. And then they have to do things like, did you know that some of the skin cell DNA from Mr. Brown was on Officer Wilson's gun? Now, what does that tell us? At some point, he grabbed the officer's gun. You didn't hear about that in the media, did you?
Of course not.
Okay. He was a large man. Hit the officer hard enough to give him a low-grade concussion and fractured the orbit around his eye socket. That was a lot of stuff you didn't hear. So the media runs with these false narratives, which they claim racism, but is actually a display of racism in the media. But yeah, what you're talking about is I have seen murder investigations, shooting investigations, officer involved shooting investigations go both ways. You think you got one thing, and then the facts bear out something else. So that's why I'm very cautious after hundreds of such cases, thinking, we really need to finish this investigation. You can't jump to conclusions, and you can't engage in confirmation bias. That's a very dangerous thing to jump into. That said, let's go to the riots. You guys may have heard me say in the past, when people are like, well, the cops are blah, 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 blah. You get the cops you vote for. Straight up, you get the cops you vote for. If the people in Seattle don't like their cops, well, they didn't vote for the police chief. No, but you voted for the mayor and the city council, who appoints the chief of police. They set the budget for the police, and they set the priorities for the police, which we're seeing now. What happens when the mayor and the city council tell the police, hey, don't arrest rioters? They don't get arrested. Okay. Well, if you are unhappy with the police not arresting rioters, who should you be unhappy with?
The mayor, for sure.
Because it's not the cops making these decisions. The DA is directly elected by the people. If you got a DA that refuses to do their job, who do you have to hold accountable? You can scream at the cops all day, but really that's like posting angry on Facebook. What does that accomplish? Maybe it makes you feel better, but other than that, it really accomplishes nothing. Holding your elected representatives accountable, that's what accomplishes something. I'll tell you what, if I was a citizen of Seattle or Portland right now, I would be working on getting enough signatures for a recall election on my mayor, my city council, my district attorney. That's what I'd be up to. I'd be extraordinarily unhappy with what's going on. As far as the riots, I'm going to take you back in time to the early 80s. Before the Big 12 conference in college, there was the Big 8. And K-State is in Manhattan, KU is in Lawrence, Kansas, and they have a rivalry, which is kind of always, it's one of those big deals, like any sports rivalry. So they were having the Big 8 finals. It was the KU versus K-State game, and that was in Manhattan, and K-State won. So everybody's in Aggieville, which is the big bar district outside of K-State, and they're whooping it up. And there had been a near riot a few years earlier that everybody remembered. So they all start gathering, and there was like word on the street. Of course, this is pre-internet and pre-social media, but word on the street was, oh yeah, there's going to be a riot. People were milling about, massive crowd. People were publicly drinking. But Riley County Police Department in Manhattan wasn't doing anything about it. They had, even back then, tell me if some of this sounds familiar now. Riley County Police Department was not allowed to have spotlights on their patrol cars because when they used those, it was deemed as being offensive and too aggressive.
Wow.
They were not allowed to have, remember back in the day when every cop car had a shotgun in a rack right there in the front seat next to the dashboard? They were not allowed to have shotguns because it was too aggressive. Sounds familiar, huh?
Roger. Mm-hmm.
So Riley County Police were on the periphery keeping an eye on stuff. People were publicly drinking. They were drinking open containers in public, which is illegal in Kansas. You can't walk around in a public place drinking. Everybody was doing it, getting rowdy, a few fist fights. They're breaking stuff up. And I remember distinctly somebody throwing a big rock. And it was like everybody held their breath to see what was going to happen next. And the cops did nothing. Then it happened again. Then it happened again. And then a big window got broke. People were throwing beer bottles. There was some fighting. There was kind of a melee. And then, of course, us being more wholesome back then and where we are in the world, somebody smashed out the front plate glass window of a record store, and they started to loot the store. But then some of the rednecks took great umbrage to this and started beating up the other looters. So there was a big melee to do with that. And the police did nothing. So at one point, a troop from Fort Riley, soldier from Fort Riley, I saw him put a gas mask on, and I had been in the National Guard for a couple of years by that point, so I knew what I was looking at. Guy put on an M17 gas mask, walked into the middle of the street, and dropped a big CS grenade. Anybody that knows
Nice.
the big military CS canister right in the middle of the crowd. And because of how tight the quarters there, Aggieville is one of the older parts of town. The streets are very narrow. The cloud and there was no wind. It just covered like 2 blocks worth of street. People were gagging and coughing and running away screaming. And this one guy from Fort Riley ended the riot with a single canister of CS.
That's spectacular.
It gets better. So the sense I got was people started the riot because they felt they had to, because when they started acting up, the police did nothing. So then they felt the need to, well, if we don't have a riot, then, we're going to look like pansies, right? So they did. Well, they broke up the riot. Then slowly, about 45 minutes, half an hour later, 45 minutes, people started coming back into Aggieville, and the riot started back up again because they allowed it to have the momentum to get going again. And this ended up in many more stores smashed. And for the time, a couple $1 million worth of damage was a lot of money. Cars upside down in the street on fire, things like that. And why did all that happen? Because the police allowed it. If they had popped more CS and maybe beanbagged or billy clubbed a few people, it would have been over with. The merchants of Aggieville wouldn't have been out a couple of $1 million. People wouldn't have had damaged, burned out cars, etc. I don't know how many hundreds of people got, heads split open and things like that, fighting, broken glass, rocks flying, things like that, that probably swamped the local hospital emergency room as well. Why? Because the police weren't willing to use a measured amount of force early to make the point that that kind of disorder wasn't to be allowed. And this is what I'm consistently seeing out of a lot of these riots in various places. The police are afraid to do what it needs, do what needs to be done to end it. That said, also, what we are seeing now is not organic riots like what I saw happen. What we're seeing consistently, and you've seen this in the media, is we have people who are coming in from out of town. They're being bankrolled by people. Because if you're not working and you don't have a job, each of you is taking a vacation, right? So if you take off work, you go on vacation, who pays for your meals? Who pays for your hotel? You do. How long can you take away from work before you go broke? Yeah, probably not that long, right? Well, some of these people are professional rioters. They're professional agitators. Somebody's paying for their participation in these activities. The young man with the AR-15 that shot the 3 dudes in Kenosha, none of those 3 dudes were from Kenosha. All 3 of them were felons. What were they doing there? They were professional agitators. What we're seeing here is actually a low-level financed insurgency. This is something that is being put on. It's an organized thing. And there's millions of dollars being thrown into this effort.
Well, isn't that domestic terrorism?
You can call it what you will. I don't care about the label, but it is what it is. What we have here is people who are going outside the political process to force other people into following what their political beliefs are.
And right? I got just a side tangent. I mean, we can definitely go down this rabbit hole some more, but we spoke with Cato Murakami last week, and he's working in Chicago suburb as an actual police officer, and his department is fairly well trained because of his actions, but he sees a lot of the same issues you do, undertraining, et cetera. But we asked him about the feeling on the street and the fact that, you may even get, 500 or 1,000 rioters in certain locations, but those still seem to be a small minority compared to the actual public support from the residents of the neighborhoods. How do you feel about that where you work?
Fortunately, we've been very calm here. Kansas City, an hour down the road, has been a little bit more animated, but even then, it seems like the police there, and they have a very good, very well-trained police department. They have an African-American mayor. The previous chief was also African-American. Good dude. I knew the chief, and not like beer drinking buddies or anything, but I knew him through my contacts in Kansas City. Good dude. So I think the city leaders there and the police department, because of how well they're trained and their professionalism, they have a little bit better, relationship with the community. Even though Kansas City has a history of some issues back in the past, and some pretty bad violent crime problems previously, like the 80s and 90s were horrible for street crime. But yeah, what I consistently see in what we're looking at these incidents is the people that the rioters are claiming to be standing up for, like they're worried about the welfare of people of color, let's say, are the same people who are the most victimized by these riots.
Absolutely.
A lot of the businesses that were burned out in Kenosha, in Milwaukee, in Minneapolis, were owned by minority people. And it's the same BS that you saw out of the LA riots. Most of those businesses were people, the people that they claimed to be standing up for were the people that were most victimized. And I tell you, I'll throw something out there a lot of people aren't aware of, because you really need to read your insurance if you've never done it. Most people look at that big wad of paper, sign it, and call it a day, right? And then when they have a natural disaster, what do you mean I don't have flood insurance and you're not paying for anything? You know what else, like homeowners, business owners, renters insurance typically doesn't pay for? Acts of war or civil unrest. So a lot of these businesses where people were just hanging on because of the COVID and things like that, and now they get burned out, and they're like, "Hey, I want to rebuild. What's my insurance covers nothing because civil unrest or acts of war are not covered by your insurance."
So they ruin those people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. They put them in a hole that they may never recover from, which is really ironic because Black Lives Matter has been receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from all over the world. And, I've been kind of paying attention on their site because they have to report some of this stuff, where their money goes. Primarily, their money goes to Democratic National Party and to other political entities. In my opinion, Black Lives Matter is a money laundering organization. And that's what they're around for. But I can tell you what they haven't been doing is helping out these people that have had their businesses burned out. African-American people in places like Minneapolis that have suffered horrendous loss of livelihood, businesses. I remember seeing a lady the other day, ironically on Fox News, where they were talking to this lady. Her beauty salon had been burned out and she was trying to look for help to, get a business loan or something. Her insurance wasn't going to cover the damage. Her business was burned out. She had a total loss of all her product. And so they were doing like one of those GoFundMe pages for her on the Fox. But, Black Lives Matter with hundreds of millions of dollars could have came in and bought that lady a brand new building. Did they? No.
I didn't see any of them run down to Louisiana and help any of the hurricane victims either.
Oh, no. And you won't. You won't.
And Chuck, if I can add to kind of what you're hitting on, there were 3 polls, I believe, just came out in the last 24 hours or the last day or so that show that the black community has doubled in the amount of votes that they plan on voting for President Trump right now. I think like roughly around 19% compared to 8% was the average. And I believe that it's a direct relationship to what's being allowed to take place in the streets and against those people that you just mentioned.
The irony of all this is when you demonize the cops. I can tell you right now in the police world, depolicing is rampant. You want your cops out there looking for bad guys, trying to catch burglars, things like that, right? Guess what they're not doing? They're not doing any of that. I got a buddy in Indianapolis. He used to be a go-getter, but he's had 2 shootings in his career because he's had like legitimate bad guys. One of the guys he shot was a bank robber. They had a running gunfight, like something you'd see out of Miami Vice. He shot him. It was what it was, very clearly a justified shoot. But then he's like, well, what if I get into a third shooting now in the middle of all this? What's going to happen to me? How's that going to look? So guess what he's doing? Nothing. He's not stopping cars. He's not looking for bad guys. If he doesn't get a radio call, he's sitting in a parking lot because he's afraid to do police work. And I can tell you that that's a microcosm of what's happening all over the United States right now. The police are not looking for bad guys. And in many places, you can tell because what's happening to the crime rate. It's skyrocketing in a lot of cities, skyrocketing. If that's what you want the cops to do, that's what you're going to get. But the law of unintended consequences is always in play. There is no such thing as a free lunch is also always in play.
Well, I think, Chuck, we talked about it a little bit that you were saying a lot of people or a lot of officers that are punching their clock and getting out as soon as they can. And I wonder, I see Greg Ellifritz online. I guess recently he finally got out the door and he says he's about ready to release some info. Maybe he's one of the guys that was like, okay, I'm done with this stuff. I don't know if you know him or not.
Oh yeah, Greg. I call Greg a friend. We've trained together. He's the kind of guy I can call up, hit him up for advice or talk about, whatever. We compare notes on police work quite a bit. Obviously I'm a little bit older school than Greg, but he's hit retirement age. But yeah, everybody I know that can get out is getting out. And you can see it in recruiting and retention right now. When I put in 1987, when I got hired, I took the test in 1986. I walked into an auditorium at Washburn University, and there were 700 people there to take the written test. Nowadays, before things went sideways, my friends at the police department who do recruiting, at my old police department that do recruiting, they say they're lucky to get between 20 and 40 applicants. We had 700 people trying to get 17 slots when I got hired. And now they'll get 20 to 40 applicants. Maybe they're trying to hire 15 and they'll get, 6 or 8 valid applicants out of that by the time they do, physical fitness test, do a physical at the doctor, do a background check, things like that. And you want to do all these things. We can look at like Miami in the 80s. How did they have a problem with, oh, here's a drug dealer who's in one of the canals floating it. Why is he wearing police handcuffs? Well, that's because they hired a bunch of people that they fast tracked through the system and they didn't do background checks. And oops, that guy was a felon. You want to make sure these things are being professionally handled. And, right now there's a lot of departments who are hiring warm bodies. They're hiring people they shouldn't hire, and they're keeping people they shouldn't keep. So it's just going to make the problem worse, not better.
Yeah. Well, what could these cities and states, what resources could they actually request, and what actions could those resources use to quell these things? And then how difficult and how much time do you think that would take?
Oh, it could be done very, very quickly. Did you see over the past couple of days where the mayor of Portland outlined a plan where She told the feds she didn't need any of their help. She's going to use local resources. And oops, the Oregon State Police and a bunch of the sheriff's departments around that area are like, hey, you wrote us into your mutual aid plan without asking us first. So no, we're not going to participate in your party. I'm not sure if you saw
I read that this
did.
morning.
That
Sure did.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to ask nice before you assign other people's officers. But part of the problem was if I was a chief executive, just like in Atlanta, you saw people helping out with the Atlanta riots. And then people, when they criminally charged the 2 officers in the Brooks shooting, all of those outer agencies pulled out. Why? Because you can't risk your officers being criminally prosecuted by a DA who is improperly applying prosecutorial discretion to make political statements. You can't risk your people, so you just don't put them in that situation. Right now, the mayor of Portland could ask the feds for resources. They could get the National Guard. They could get federal officers. They could get the FBI. They could get the U.S. Marshals. They could get a lot of resources. They could get the National Guard. And then if their DA and the mayor stood up and said, hey, we're going to end these riots. We're going to prosecute every rioter that gets arrested that we have a valid case on. You know, they're throwing bricks, they're doing property damage, they're assaulting people, whatever it is, full prosecution to the full extent of the law. And at that point, you actually start using some of these resources. Like the FBI guys would be superb when I talked about who's financing this stuff. These people coming in from out of town are staying places at like hotels. You start rolling some of these rioters up, and then you start working financials. If they don't have a job, where's their money coming from? It'd be like think of a mafia investigation or a cartel drug investigation. You don't want the dude on the street with the 8-ball. You want the drug lord in like Guadalajara, right? Or the mafia don. When you're doing, like if you're trying to arrest Al Capone and you get one of his henchmen or you catch his accountant, then, you know, you work your way up the chain. You know, how did Al Capone go to prison? They didn't get him for the murder. They couldn't pin the murders and stuff on him, so they nailed him for tax evasion. That's how they got Al Capone. All of that could be applied immediately to places like Portland and Seattle. These resources could be thrown into the mix very quickly within the course of a few days. Some of these investigations would take a few weeks. Start applying RICO, where you treat it as organized crime, because guess what? It is organized crime. People start looking at federal charges. This would end quickly. It's only continuing because they're allowing it to continue.
That's really what's astonishing to me, Chuck, is that obviously, you know, the property damage, the loss of businesses, the money that's happening, and also fatalities in Seattle and Portland, and that they just choose to allow it to occur. That's what's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Why do we think they're allowing it to go on?
Well, it's political wishful thinking. I have found that in politics, so when I look at some of the people screaming about social justice, racial injustice, things like that, people screaming, whatever they're screaming, because I'm kind of agnostic about some of this stuff. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, kind of a constitutionalist. I'd say I'm a small L libertarian, but there's so many idiots in the Libertarian Party that's kind of screwed up that label. But at any rate, yeah, are you guys familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church, the Phelps
Oh, yeah.
group?
Yes.
So early in my career, they used to protest the police department. They would be out front with their signs, God hates fags. They would be screaming fags at us as we come and go, like walk out of roll call, go across the street to the lot where we get our police cars and go to work. They would be screaming all that at us. So, you know, I had people picketing the police department and screaming fags and all this stuff at me decades ago. And you look at people like that and you know they're Fruit Loops. They're basically cult members. They're a little bit unhinged. The way they see reality is like clearly different than what it is. So what I've noticed about the socialists, the communists, the people pushing a lot of these agendas, if you think of their beliefs as just another goofy cult, it makes a lot more sense. Because when I see people screaming in a lot of these protests, the behavior is exactly the same as what I used to see out of the Phelps group. And a lot of these people would probably be just aghast that I compared them to the Phelps group because, the Phelpses are famously anti-gay and things like that. And so they're very not politically correct. People think the same behavior for a different cause somehow makes them right. It doesn't. The behavior is still abhorrent. You can't what I call other people. You can't other human beings. You can't paint with a wide brush. When people are screaming about racism while engaging in racism, there's a bit of hypocrisy there. When people claim to abhor lynch mob behavior by engaging in lynch mob behavior, there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on there. So, when you think of what's going on as just another variation of religious fanaticism, the behavior makes a lot more sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's definitely something ironic about the people shouting that the current administration is destroying America are actually the ones that are literally destroying America.
So some of this magical, well-wishing thinking, where was it, Baltimore, where the one politician said, well, we have to give people room to destroy or space to destroy.
Wow. Yeah, that's near verbatim. Yeah.
You guys remember that one?
Yeah.
So that's what I think of as called a magical wishful thinking. It's like out of touch with reality. So in my opinion, that has a much in common with reality is, so the Aztecs believed that they had to sacrifice people to make the rain gods happy so the corn would grow, right? So when the rain didn't come and the corn wasn't growing, what'd they do? They'd sacrifice more people. And we're seeing that sort of definition of insanity where you do the same thing over and over again, each time expecting a better outcome. Guess what? Sacrificing the Aztecs, we could document historically. The Aztecs at one point in a 3-day period sacrificed an estimated 65,000 of their own people. Guess what that didn't do? Didn't make the rain come, didn't make the corn grow. So, let's have people have an autonomous zone and blow off steam in Seattle. How did that work out? And we see this wishful thinking. People in New York and California right now are famously moving to other parts of the country because they're leaving destruction and a crappy society in their wake. And then, like Californians moving to Austin, Texas, they're ruining Austin, Texas,
Because they move there and they vote for the same policies that they instituted where they lived, and they wonder why the same thing's happening.
So definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over again, the same way, expecting a better outcome. And are they literally insane? No, but it's behavior that borders on what the hell are you thinking?
Well, Chuck, something you said made me think about Thomas More's book Utopia. Just like in Chaz, they think that they can implement a utopia. Well, what happened in Thomas More's book is a dictatorship, just like it started to take place in Chaz. I mean, any area where there's no real law and order, where there's anarchy, we know what takes place. The powerful end up taking over, and then there's a police state. So kind of interesting.
Oh, absolutely. One of the ironies of the Antifa, which most people don't, they think that's a new thing. Antifa was formed in Germany during the Weimar Republic era, so they're stated mission is to be anti-fascist. Do you guys have any idea how fascism came about?
Have ideas, but let's hear it.
I'm half German, so I was born over there. I wasn't even born here. People scream about immigration, and I'm half Cherokee. I was born in another country. I got a little bit more perspective than some people, and I kind of read some of this history because I had a different education growing up because I wasn't always here. So the fascism came about as a reaction to violent communism that had spread from Russia into places like Germany and France and Italy. So Mussolini, Hitler, they are products of a backlash of violent communism in those countries. The communism came first. The fascism was a reaction to it. Now, I'm not excusing fascism because they're both abhorrent, but when people talk about left wing, right wing, that's a false paradigm. That's kind of like Crips and Bloods. When you really boil it down, except for their gang colors, what's the difference between the Crips and the Bloods?
Very little.
They're very little. Street gang culture is street gang culture. The things that they engage in, the crime, the sociology of it, very, 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 very similar. What's the difference between communists and fascists? Nothing.
Very little.
They got different labels. So the whole we're anti-fascist, we're fighting fascism. You created fascism. Fascism exists because of violent communism, but that's part of the double talk. When I think about Animal Farm in 1984, I tell people George Orwell wrote a cautionary tale. He did not write a how-to manual. A lot of people are taking that as a how-to manual.
Absolutely, you're correct.
Some of the double speak, the censorship, the trying to shut people up. I'm a big fan of the whole. I disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Big fan of that. Big fan of Santayana. He who ignores history is doomed to repeat it. Throw another quote here. James Lillicks, I think I'm saying that right. Personally, I'm interested in keeping other people from building utopia because the more you believe you can create heaven on earth, the more likely you are to set up guillotines in the public square to hasten the process.
That's a great quote.
So, oh yeah. And, if we look at like the French Revolution, yeah, that's an example of where this really goes off the rails and where we could be headed if we let it go there. The French Revolution was not a happy thing. It was not like the American Revolution where, something good came of it that led eventually to a much more advanced and the most free society that has ever existed on the face of the earth. Some of the stuff people complain about now, the police, it's I saw today another public figure compared America to Nazi Germany. Get out. My grandma was arrested by the Gestapo during World War II. You want to know why? Because everybody had to have a picture of Hitler hanging in like their living room in their house, and she refused to do it.
Wow.
And somebody informed on her. She got arrested by the Gestapo for not having a picture of Hitler in her house. And the only reason she didn't end up getting shot is one of her neighbors made up a story because they had been bombed. He goes, oh, no, she's got a picture. Whoever told on her made that up. Her picture got knocked off the wall by the last bombing raid, and I was fixing the frame for her. That's, lied to the Gestapo is the only reason she didn't end up getting shot. That's the kind of thing. That's a police state. The only reason we're having these riots now, you know why? Because if the cops were as violent as people claim they were, most of these rioters would be dead, but they're not. This is the only place on the planet where you can get away with this type of BS. I'm not advocating excessive force by any means, but if the police were what they say they were, then none of this would be happening because all of these people would be beat down or dead. But they're not. because
that falls right into the same with the anti-gun crowd. If there are so many guns and bullets in private possession in the United States, if we were the problem, you would know, and you'd all be dead.
Oh, and this is one of the problems I have with some of the people who are in the gun community but anti-police or anti-government.
Oh boy!
Right now, like one of my buddies that's locally, our mayor wants to fall into that whole 8 can't wait thing that the Black Lives Matter want. All of these. Defund the police, ban chokeholds. We got a proposal that not every officer on duty needs a gun. Because when an officer shows up with a gun, it escalates the situation. So they need to study whether every officer on duty needs to have a firearm or not. That's how ridiculous this is. Well, I can tell you this is one of those, like the Revolutionary War quote, if we don't hang together, we'll all hang separately.
Mm-hmm.
If they manage to take away all the guns from the police, whose guns do you think they're going to go after next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're definitely attempting to do that right now, and that kind of segues into kind of something that I wanted to hit on, is in the absence of law enforcement on the ground, and you say with the case with the McCloskeys, pardon me, and the Rittenhouse case right now. One of the things that I find concerning, and kind of hitting on the French Revolution comment you stated earlier, Chuck, is that when folks have to take defense into their own hands right now, the next thing you know, they're being prosecuted. What's your thoughts on that?
And see, this goes back to the totality of the entire mess that the system has right now. A lot of the things that people complain about with the police in the criminal justice system are not a criminal justice problem. You're familiar with people screaming about, well, we need to take qualified immunity away from the cops. People don't even know what qualified immunity is. Do you realize that qualified immunity does not protect you from criminal acts? If you commit a crime, qualified immunity is not in play. The most glaring example of qualified immunity is something historical you can look up, Garner versus Tennessee, which gives us our Supreme Court ruling on when you can and cannot use deadly force. So long story short, Memphis, Tennessee, back then, most of the country, you could shoot fleeing felons just for being a fleeing felon. So officer in Memphis shows up, residential break-in, dude's running out of the back of the house after trying to steal a TV. He's escaping on foot. Officer fires shots because he's going to escape, hits him in the back and kills him. Turns out to be a 14-year-old kid. So lawsuit happens, goes up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, yeah, we can't be utilizing deadly force in nonviolent felonies. That's excessive, and Tennessee law is an error. So the officer at the time, he did what he was trained to do. He did what Tennessee law said he should do. And now they're changing the rules. So the officer had qualified immunity at that time because he did what he was supposed to do under the law, under policy, under training. You can't go back in time and go, yeah, we're going to change the rules on you in the middle of the deal. That's what qualified immunity covers. And it covers very, very few cases. Now, bump forward here to these prosecutors like Kamala Harris, who actually engaged in prosecutorial misconduct. Do you realize that prosecutors and judges have absolute immunity?
Roger. Mm-hmm.
In the case of Kamala Harris, she withheld evidence that would have helped prove somebody innocent. She knew she was withholding it. But you can't sue her for that because she has absolute immunity, not qualified immunity, absolute immunity. Now, if a cop had done that, you could sue the cop. Qualified immunity doesn't count. So prosecutors, these DAs that are doing these political prosecutions, you voted for these people. If you don't like your prosecutor, you voted for them. They are a political animal. They need to be held accountable. You also need to know So I don't know if any of you guys were in the military, but familiar with the term MET-T?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mission Equipment Time Training Troops, right? I guess it's MET-TC now, but it was MET-T when I was in, which led to the common joking reply on any question in the Army could be answered with terrain dictates. But if you're going to fight a battle, you need to know the terrain you're on, correct? I mean, that's your Sun Tzu, your art of war. That's basic stuff. So what terrain are you on? If you're in Kenosha and you're deciding to defend your business, or let's jump to St. Louis. What happened to that couple in St. Louis? Now, did they use bad tactics, in my opinion, going out in the front yard, waving a pistol and having an AR-15? I think they set themselves up. If the crowd had guns, they could have just been shot in the middle of their own front yard, right? They probably should have bunkered up, used better tactics, but whatever. Now they're being criminally prosecuted by the DA for political purposes, right? You need to know what kind of DA you have. You need to know your state and local laws, because all of that is the terrain on which you operate. I know people here in Kansas, because we have constitutional carry, we have a permit system, and a big part of the permit class, which is why I tell people to take it, is most of the class is learning Kansas state laws, when you can and cannot use a gun, when you can and cannot claim self-defense. This is critical information. A lot of people carrying guns, never been to class, and I'll have people hit me up because they know, hey, let's go ask the cop, right? Hey, so I went out, I got up early in the morning, I walked out, and there was a dude breaking into my car, and I had my gun, and I was staring at him, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can pull a gun on this guy or not. Well, right in the middle of the incident is not the time to go try and Google this stuff. Yeah. You kind of need to know beforehand, right? So what can you and can you not legally do? In some places, you can defend yourself and your property against a violent burglary or an arson by utilizing deadly force. Some places you can't. You need to know where you're living. You need to know what you can and cannot do. You also need to know things like, if you're in a state where you're not supposed to have, let's call them standard capacity magazines, because, like a 30-round mag for your AR. Maybe you got one of those and you're in California and the state law says you can't have more than 10 rounds. You know what I would not get caught with in the middle of a self-defense shooting? A 30-round mag. I have seen prosecutions to make political statements over things like that. You guys remember the case of Bernard Goetz, the subway shooter in New York City?
Yep.
So that was a legitimate use of deadly force in a deadly force scenario, but he got jammed up on a felony because he was illegally carrying a handgun on the subway. You kind of got to know what you're dealing with, what you can and cannot do, and then you have to be able to live with the ramifications of your decisions. I'm a huge constitutionalist, huge believer in civilian self-defense and people responsibly owning guns. One of the things I point out to people who abhor actually attending training is, you remember in the Second Amendment, that whole well-regulated militia part? The anti-gunners will act like the regulation means laws, like you need to have a lot of laws. Well, back then, in archaic language, regulated didn't mean laws. It meant to be in good order, to be functioning correctly. Like a double-barrel shotgun, a gunsmith, when they're building a double-barrel shotgun, will regulate the barrels so that they both shoot to the same point where you're aiming, instead of one goes one way, one goes the other. A lot of people that I know that are in the gun world are not well regulated because they don't know the law, they're not well trained, and they're kind of falling down in their duties as a good citizen. So I'm a big fan of people. We know post-Katrina, as an example, there was looters and there were people had to set up kind of an armed neighborhood watch to keep looters out of their neighborhood. I see a lot of that going on in Kenosha right now and in other places. I think when the police can't help you, you have to help yourself. And I think people should be self-reliant, but they also have to legally, morally, ethically know when you can and cannot use force, things like that.
No, that's a great response, and we agree with you on that. That all these new gun owners, it's a ripe time for, especially our mentors, guys like you and Tom Givens, Craig, that those individuals, they need to get proper training, absolutely. And like you said, on the legal end, that's I guess we can bring in Masada and whatnot, folks like that. That's training that everybody needs.
Well, and just something as simple as most of the concealed carry courses I know, like the one in Kansas, they don't actually teach you how to conceal carry, like how to conceal your gun, what holster to buy. Like if you go to a couple of my friends' classes, you can get a workshop on the best way to do appendix inside the waistband, how to get a concealed draw. Well, the concealed carry class doesn't teach you any of that. The vast, probably 6 out of 8 hours is Kansas law, the legalities of when you can and cannot use force, when you can and cannot use deadly force, different crimes that you can, what constitutes a crime, where you can carry your gun, where you can't carry your gun. This is critical information, and not to bang on my buddy much, but again, when you're standing there on your porch staring at a bad guy who is burglarizing your car, which is a felony, but not a person felony, and he's like, oh crap, what do I do? Well, that's a poor time to think about those choices, You need to know what you can and cannot do. I'll also throw out, part of what I'm kind of famous for now is teaching less lethal options in the civilian world, because that was always like a cop thing. But, what can and cannot do? I'm a big fan of OC spray. If they're legal in your state, saps and blackjacks, and having the training to use those effectively. When we were talking about using enough force early, think about the George Zimmerman case. If George Zimmerman early in the encounter had pepper sprayed Trayvon Martin and backed off and called 911, would we even know who George Zimmerman is? He'd have never went on trial for murder. He'd have never been on CNN. He wouldn't be a social pariah, etc. You'd have never heard of the incident because it wouldn't have turned into what it turned into, right? So having those options, I think one of the things that's going to get the kid in Kenosha with the AR-15 in trouble is I saw a video of him being interviewed by one of the street journalists, and he actually said, I could tell, I think he's a police explorer or something. He was familiar with cop vernacular, and he's like, no, we don't have less lethal. So he's familiar with the concept. Dude, I would tell you, if I was going to go defend a business and I know I'm going to be out someplace where something like this could happen, I might bring something like, I don't know, a big can of bear spray with me so that I have some option between harsh language and a gun. There's a wide gap between talking to people and killing people.
For sure. Well, we've gone down a bunch of rabbit holes here, and I've greatly enjoyed it. But we're gonna take it back just a little bit, and and it's kind of related since you're talking about use of force. Let's assume you're in your home and this use of force has become proper. What are you reaching for on the nightstand?
Okay, so I'm a big fan of any gun you've got is better than no gun you got. If it's going to guns, I see in the firearms world where perfect is the enemy of good. I have several people, friends, and clients over the years that I have set up with something like a Ruger 1022 with a 25-round magazine full of CCI mini mags. High visibility sights and a small flashlight. Why? Because, for their mission profile, what they're actually going to train with, what they're going to enjoy shooting. Sometimes a couple of my friends are farmers. They need a gun that they're more likely to have to shoot coyotes to get them away from the chickens or raccoons or something. than they are to have to shoot a bad guy, but they want a gun that can handle a bad guy as well. Ruger 1022 with a magazine full of CCI mini mags is going to be a pretty good option. People poo-poo that, but talking with Claude Warner, the thought occurred to me when I was reflecting on my career. Every single 22 rifle shooting incident that I have attended has been a homicide.
Wow.
Every single one. Because a bullet that penetrates sufficiently to get the job done that you can aim very accurately tends to work real well. Most of those incidents, people are like, yeah, but how many? Well, most of them were a single round event. You hit the dude once and it was fatal. So shotguns, if you're into shotguns, a lot of bird hunters around here, they would be better off with a shotgun that they are practiced with, maybe a shorter barrel version of what they practice with versus going out and buying an AR-15 that they never practice with. I could tell you that early in my career when I was a broke young cop with very little money. So I had my duty gun, my off-duty gun, and at one point I had a pump shotgun. I'm going to go for the pump shotgun because they're extraordinarily effective, easy to hit with, things like that. Eventually I had an AR-15. But even then, for the vast majority of what I might have to repel borders with, my thought was, because that was my patrol rifle to go to work with, if I had to grab something for home defense, I was going to grab the shotgun first. Any gun you use in self-defense is going to be confiscated by the police. It's going to be held in evidence. It's going to here in Kansas, it'll go to the KBI lab for analysis and testing. So I would rather lose the shotgun and still have the AR-15 in the gun safe in case maybe it's a gangbanger and his friends want to come back for retaliation. I would think about the second and third order effects. If I was someplace like California, would I rather use a wood stock pump action 12 gauge for defense versus an evil assault rifle? I would probably rather go to court with the shotgun. So what would I grab right now? Right this minute, it's going to be a Glock 45 with a set of Cal DeFore sights on it because that's within arm's reach.
Cool.
But I'm pretty confident across the board with rifle, pistol, shotgun. So I'm kind of agnostic there. Your carry gun might be the gun you grab. But given my druthers, I would grab the biggest gun I could grab if I got time to get to it.
Well, so then if you have time, what are you grabbing?
A Mossberg 590 that's full of federal low recoil flight control.
There you go.
I love that round, by the way. All the flight control is just amazing. If you look up the specs on it, my gosh.
It shoots. For a shotgun, it shoots softly. And then quite frankly, I don't know if any of you guys have experienced gunfire indoors. My hearing is already bad enough. I've been exposed to 357 Magnums, 9 millimeters, a 45 in an apartment, shotgun fire. I had to fire my AR-15 twice while I was on duty with no ear protection. I have been flashbanged. I have been near explosions in the military. I want to keep all the hearing I can keep. And then one of the advantages of that low recoil flight control buck is it's relatively, for gunfire, it's fairly low impulse. Man, you crack off a carbine indoors, dang, that's, you're talking about permanent hearing damage. And then I don't see, I have seen and worked cases of home invasion. It is not a Japanese Banzai charge on Guadalcanal. It's not a zombie horde. That's not what you're facing. I've got 8 rounds of flight control in that 590 that I'm very competent with. And then, I know in the police world, the average shotgun engagement is a 1-round event. There's a reason for that. And then if, worse comes to worse, I've always got other stuff that I can grab. I've got 16-inch AR-15 with a low power variable optic. I got another one with aim point. So, I've got options.
Nice. Well, that was just a fun little kind of way to wrap it up. And just a follow-up on some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. I just got a notification that the Oregon, not all, but a portion of the Oregon State Patrol, the troopers that are actually working the riot stuff in Portland, have been cross-deputized as federal marshals, meaning if they arrest people, they can face federal charges, not just local charges. That's a step in the right direction.
I believe so. What that allows the State Patrol to do is to help the feds out if they go back to attacking the federal courthouse.
Yeah.
Then, they can, if they make an arrest, those officers can process under federal charges instead of state charges, which has to do with jurisdictional things. It's technicalities under the law, but, you see these police shows. Oh, he got off on a technicality. Well, that's exactly the type of thing that in real life is a technicality. You can't do what some of these TV cops do. I can't go get a search warrant out of my briefcase and then go search somebody's house. There's a process for these things to happen that most people are unaware of. And cross-deputization, probably a good idea. We see that sort of thing locally where we have officers, like we have an organized crime FBI task force. There's a police officer from the PD there. There's a sheriff's deputy there. A guy from the U.S. Marshal Service. So when they're looking for people, I don't know. I hit you guys with a war story. So I got called into the office one time, a long time ago, and this is the power that rich and famous people have. So the FBI task force was looking for a dude in Topeka, and they couldn't find him. So my watch commander calls me in because I knew I took knowing my beat very seriously in the old school cop way. And he's like, "Hey, you know this guy?" "Yeah, well, yeah, that's such and such. And I know his other cousin's a boxer. Yeah, I know that dude. Well, FBI's been looking for him for 3 days, can't find him." So I get a briefing from the supervisory special agent out of Kansas City on his task force that they're looking for this dude. So no kidding, there I was. The director of the FBI, Louis Freeh, had called the FBI, the Kansas City field office, and directed them to go to Topeka and find this guy. Now, why did the director of the FBI do such a thing? Because he had been contacted by Steven Spielberg, that Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg has enough money that Steven Spielberg has his own security and he has his own intelligence unit. Steven Spielberg's intelligence unit had worked up actionable intelligence that there was a nationwide plot by actual Nazis, actual right-wing. Back in the day, the Nazis were much more than, the right-wing thing was a big deal. It no longer is. It's defunct. But back then you had prison groups like the Covenant, the Covenant, the Sword and the Arm of the Lord. We had the Posse Comitatus, Aryan Nations, things like that. They were a big deal. And they had come up with a plot that to make a big splash in the media, they were devising a nationwide plot all on the same day that they would assassinate prominent Jewish people. And one of the people on the hit list was Steven Spielberg. So Steven Spielberg's intel unit briefs Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg calls the director of the FBI. The director of the FBI calls the Kansas City field office and tells the SAC, find this MRFer. And they end up in Topeka, and then they end up calling me. And because I had the on the street intel and knew where to find the guy, I found him later that night. And then he got arrested, and I didn't see that guy for 20 years. But yeah, that's if you put a mind to do it, that's the kind of thing you can throw resources at and make it happen. But that's also an example of how special people get special treatment. And you and I don't always get that same treatment.
Yeah, true. There's some privilege. Well, man, this has been great, but I think we're going to go ahead and close it out, man. I want to specifically point out that I appreciate your knowledge of history, because the way that you're able to tie that stuff together, and there's a lot of that stuff that you brought up that I'm familiar with, but not nearly as knowledgeable about, that people don't realize. We're repeating stuff. We've seen this before, and it ties into things that were set in motion decades ago. This is not new. This is just a resurgence of things that we've seen before with a different face on it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I have cops now. The young guys are, oh my God, it's so bad. It's never been. Well, dude, I was a cop in the late 80s, early 90s during the crack wars. It was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to some of my mentors like Pat Rogers, Evan Marshalls. They were cops in the late 60s, early 70s. Police stations were being bombed. Cops were being sniped left and right. Double or triple the amount of feloniously assaulted and killed officers that what we see nowadays. And yeah, this has all happened before. And in fact, the exact same playbook of people like Bill Ayers has been dusted off and is being used again. There are people who are second generation away from people like Bill Ayers who are taking that flag and running with it after being brought up under that paradigm. Oh yeah. People really need to read books like Days of Rage and look at what was happening. If they think this is new, look at what was happening in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
This has all happened before.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we find a quick and meanable ends to this, because what I'm seeing doesn't look like a good solution. And I don't think that the folks inciting these riots are really prepared to deal with what the actual fallout will be if it gets much worse, because people are starting to get real tired of it.
You know, in a small microcosm, this is kind of like domestic violence. You live with what you tolerate.
Yes.
You live with what you tolerate. You get the police you vote for, and you get the DAs and the city leaders and the county leaders that you vote for. What this all comes down to is the voters have the power to do something about this. If you don't like all of this, then you need to do something about it besides angry posting on Facebook or whatever.
Right.
You know, impotently complaining accomplishes nothing. But I think good people need to be prepared for some hard times, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
No, unfortunately. Well, hey, we're going to have you back again, because you are a great guest, and we really enjoy talking with you, man. So it's been a pleasure, man.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah. Good times. Well, guys, till next time.
Thanks a lot,
Chuck.
My pleasure.
Well, guys, it's time for accountability again, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it off, and we're going to keep this real short. I was able to hit JITS once this week. It didn't work out for me to go a second time, but I definitely kept up my studying for my tests, hit some videos, several video sessions this week, taking notes, keeping that going so I can test at the end of this month. My dry fire, I've been hitting that still pretty hard. I grabbed some of those, a target pack from Ben Stoger's website. Looking forward to really getting those going. Actually, this afternoon, I'm going to do that. Range time, I'm going to go ahead and hit the range this afternoon, too. Really looking forward to that. I was able to score some ammo, and, man, I'm just really stoked about that, because I'm not so concerned about, kicking out about, 100 rounds a session these days. Still keeping it short, but... So, and now on the drill of the week, I'll run through this real quick. I was able to hit that 15-yard portion of the FBI qual, the 6-second par on the on that bottle target. We're using the Rangemaster target between the three of us here. I did get my normal 3 renditions of the drill, and I did hit that clean each time. My group is a little wide, but that's all right. I was just simply going a little too fast. But good time. I'm glad to get shooting this week. So, Brian, how about you? How did you do?
Well, I did get 5 CrossFit sections in last week. That was more than normal, but I felt like I needed to push something because I'm lacking in some other sections. Haven't been getting as much live fire or dry fire as I should. I got some other life issues happening, and that happens. But I am going to reference some old information. Eric and I shot the FBI qual recently, but I did not shoot it this week. But on that 15-yard stage, I was able to shoot all the rounds in the par time, and I think I actually beat it by about a half second. Again, we shot it more than once, so it was a real challenge, and when we eventually, or you try that whole drill, using the time you have. And that is the one thing I would say about shooting that drill is really easy to shoot it too fast and you lose accuracy when you do it. So, but yeah, I was able to beat that par time and actually keep them on, which is cool. Only got out and flew once this week, but I'm going to try and up that some more here in the future. Again, some stuff going on that's keeping me from making all my schedules, but very cool to get at least all of that in. So how about you, Eric?
You're still getting after it, Brian. Killer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, guys, I definitely had a pretty interesting week. I got quite a bit done. Aaron, like you, I only had one JIT session, but that's more because it's a private session, and that's what my training partner and I were able to do. But in that session, he's been really wanting to focus on a lot of weapons-based stuff, so we spent quite a bit of time. We warmed up with Greco-Roman wrestling rounds, and then went into some edge weapon overview or EWO techniques, mainly the pressure, dealing with erratic stabbing and dealing with the control positions for that. I've been really interested in the Danaher straight jacket system, which is the back take portion. Guys, if folks in the audience, if you have not checked out John Danaher's teaching, it is genius. I mean, it is a system, and the way that he teaches is incredible and easy to follow. So Ryan and I worked on a lot of that portion of his system and got some rolls in. Moving on to live fire, I did get out and do just the 15-yard portion. Full disclosure, it was at 14 yards for me this week because that's what range I was able to shoot at. And I was able to shoot it clean. And both Brian and Aaron alluded to this. One of my times was under 4 seconds, 3.5 or so. I could take a lot more time and be more accurate. So with that said, I'm not going to hit on too much more. I did have a couple of workouts. I will say this, one of my birthday gifts this week was a Garmin Instinct Tactical, which I'm really enjoying that. I've had a few workouts using that, and that's given me a lot more data to crunch.
Hey, bro.
So that was kind of fun.
By the way, happy birthday.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday to you.
Nice. The Tactical Twins turned another year this last week.
Yes, sir. All right.
Well, with moving into the drill of the week, we're going to go ahead and carry on with the same mode of operandi. Let's do the 25-yard piece of the FBI qual, and it's simply from 25 yards. You have 20 seconds to fire from concealment, draw fire 4 rounds, go into a kneeling position, and fire 4 more rounds. That's it, an 8-round drill. So, do it as much as you like, but that'll keep our round count down. And frankly, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I need to focus on distance. That's why I chose these drills, to help myself out.
Yes.
And so let's get out there and shoot that, and we'll do some accountability on that next time we get together.
Awesome.
With that said, I think we're ready to close this one out, guys. What do you all think?
All good, man.
Awesome show. And as always, guys, good to hang out with you.
Oh, yeah.
Always incredible time.
Take care, guys.